Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Back from overseas with more hotel and travel points is my guy, Grant Turner. And folks, I've talked to him ahead of time. He's got some squabbles with the rankings. It's going to be awesome. First name Mark is in the house. So, GT, let's start with you. Let's start with the World Cup, the Greco World Cup. First of all, great job on the uniforms. You will never say this, but what you had to do, timeline, I got to talk to Shane about this, to put all that stuff together for people from all these different countries, get everything personalized, was not a small task. I think people just go, oh, well, Mikey did that for you. It's not that simple. So first of all, really well done.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah. So tell us about the event. You were obviously there. Tons of people getting bombed. What were your thoughts?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, the city of Baku and the Azerbaijan, local organizing committee put on an amazing event and, really outdid themselves in the sports presentation and basically making it a very cool and intimate program. It was shot very well for television. Basically everything went off without a hitch, and it was great as far as the actual performance and all that kind of thing going on there. There was some last minute changes to the event with the Serbian Wrestling Federation not being able to attend due to, I believe, COVID restrictions, or our athletes ended up all testing positive, or a lot of them testing positive for COVID. So there was a little bit of in the second pool, not as much competition as you would have normally seen on the program. Absolutely great duels, extremely competitive duels. 5-5 going down to criteria, and I think three of the duels, 6-4. So it was not just lopsided like 10-0 type duels. These were extremely competitive between all of these countries. Great showings by, Iran, Azerbaijan, and then the all-star world team put together. They really kind of came together as a team with, whatever it was, 6 different countries represented, or 7 different countries represented there. So it was really cool to be a part of it, and also to see that team atmosphere. You don't get to see that very much in international wrestling, where your team is the mat side basically cheering you on for the team. It's a very rare thing to see because we just don't get it very often. We get it a ton in the U.S., college to college, or high school or middle school or anything like that. The dual meet environment is more applicable to the U.S. markets than it is to, basically international wrestling. It just doesn't happen all that often. So
your global perspective is super, I think, interesting for us because we're kind of myopic, right? We're going to talk about a duel last week, duels this week, and duels are normal for us. I always tell people, I'm lucky enough I get to do the play-by-play at the junior duels. I know you've been at the junior duels several times, GT. That environment is different, man, than the Fargo finals. I'm not saying it's a better wrestling. I'm not out of my mind, okay? Well, maybe I'm out of my mind, but not about this. But the environment, and Mark got a shirt from Fellers a couple years ago, the winners win stuff, when they won the first time and it was close, not like this last year when they blew the doors off everybody. But it's different, man, because some of these guys are not from the same club. They might even be from competing clubs. You might have beat me in the state finals, but now we're on the same team and one of us bumped or cut. And it's fascinating. And, it's on the raised mat, on the one at junior duels, and the guys are standing next to it and they're pounding the mat. And, it's all this crazy stuff because if you score a point, you help your team, even if you lose. So it's 9-0. Grant's beating me 9-0 and I get a push out point and my team goes crazy because, I scored a point. If I can hold you off in 9-1 and now it's only 3-1 instead of it could have been 4-0 super easily. So.
Hey, Grant, I got a question for you. How did the All-Star team do? And can you kind of explain to the listeners what they did putting that team together and why they did it? Because they're going to do it in freestyle in Iowa City also.
Yeah, so there'll be a men's and women's freestyle all-star team or all-world team. So basically, the concept is that the highest placing athlete from a non-committed country to the actual top 5 teams. So you have the top 5 teams in the world, and then basically, if you were a part of the world championships and you got bronze or silver or won it, and your team didn't get top 5, you have first right of refusal for that spot for the world team. So with that being said, with the Greco stuff, as we're talking about the Greco World Cup, there was a whole bunch of athletes from Georgia because the Georgian team didn't make the top 5. So there was 3 athletes from the country of Georgia represented on the world team at 55, 63, and 67. Surtsamaya, Abuladze, and Keti Suryani were all from the Georgian Wrestling Federation, but on the world team. So then there was other athletes that basically comprised that world team up, which they will then be doing in freestyle as well. So there's, as far as all of the athletes that are, being promoted, for men's freestyle, the Albanian at 57, the guy that ended up beating Thomas Gilman for the world title, he's the representative at 57 kilos for the world team. And he's accepted his position to be on that team to represent the world team in the UWW in the Freestyle World Cup.
In Greco, how did the all-star team do?
So the all-star team ended up getting the bronze medal, or the 3rd place finish for their team. They lost a 5-5 duel with Azerbaijan on some crazy, extremely controversial point structures, in which case then a lot of the world team coaches ended up, I think 3 or 4 of them ended up getting yellow cards because of it. So long story short, to give everybody why that basically erupted in Baku was the gentleman from Hungary, Zoltan Levi, he was wrestling Suleimanov, goes over the top, gets a chest lock, gets bombed for 5 as time is expiring. After he gets bombed for 5, the dude from Azerbaijan got up, flexed, got the crowd into it. As time was running out, the official gave 5 for the throw, but Levi just laid there. He was tired, the match was over, whatever. The ref calls a fall because he hadn't moved yet, but the guy wasn't on top of him. So not only did they give up 5, they called the fall on the athlete, even though he had already scored a point in the match. So it only should have been a superior victory or a tech, meaning 9-1, but the world team would have got the 1 point for him scoring in the match. Yep. The fall takes away that point.
Yeah. So people that don't understand real quick, if you pin somebody, it's 5 team points for you, 0 for the other team. If you tech a person and shut them out, it's 4-0. And if you tech the person, but the person scores, it's 4-1. So if you just want to do the net, that pin took it from net 3 to net 5, which is 2 points, which decided the duel, right?
Yes. With everything else being how it all ended up, they did not address that with the coaching staff because the match was over. Everybody left. Next match came up. Nobody, it wasn't a fall. So therefore, that was why the coaches went berserk after the duel, is because they found out that they took away the positive point for scoring a point in that match. And on criteria, the all-star team ended up losing that duel in a 5-5 duel.
Okay.
Wow.
So then, yeah. So it was a crazy, crazy duel. Absolutely fun to watch. Anytime that you can get those matches where it's 5-5, or even in a high school duel where it's 7-7. So it's whatever it may be. It was great wrestling. Also, just the amount of talent in that facility for that Greco, it was absolutely amazing. Just great matches.
Yeah, anytime, like last show with Iowa blowing everybody out, the play-by-play wasn't as fun. But the year before that, the duels, last 4 years, the duels came down to the last match or two pretty much. And it's so much fun if you're, and it's kind of like if you're a coach, like Grant wants 15 Grandview guys in the finals this weekend, but storyline wise, that's not the most entertaining thing. So if you don't have a horse in the race, it's a lot more fun. So anyway, awesome. Okay, so a couple of other things. America killed everybody in the U15 Pan Ams. There's all the coverage is on themat.com. Check that out. Also, there was a big fundraiser in Pennsylvania this past weekend that my friend Liz Spotty put on. GT was kind enough to let me send some Nike stuff out to them, helping out the Dan Gable Wrestling Museum. Gable was out there. A bunch of luminaries were out there. Richard Perry, Mega Ludus. Leroy Smith, bunch of people. So great job by Liz. I got a chance to talk to her earlier this week. She was super nervous, but crushed it. So congratulations to her. And the press release came out yesterday. You guys have known about this for a while, but the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dual Meet Classic, we announced it's going to be held in Stillwater, Gallagher-Iba Arena, 21st, 22nd of December, 16 of the best teams in the country. The press release pretty much spells everything out. I'm blessed to be the tournament director on that. So frankly, that's why I'm talking about it for a second. Some really good teams. What people need to understand is there are certain teams that are not allowed to travel. So, for example, Iowa is not allowed to go to a non-contiguous, non-touching state. So we couldn't get any teams from Iowa, as an example. Michigan's another state like that. There's 5 or 6 states that are like that. And so if you take the top 50 teams and start pulling out the teams that can't come, and I didn't get hired till May, so it was difficult to get some teams that were already committed. We already have some commitments for next year, but super proud of the field we put together. It's going to be a 4x4 concept. So basically we'll seed the tournament, and each quarter bracket, like the 1, 8, 9, and 16, they'll wrestle each other round robin. And then the next day we'll have a gold, silver, bronze, copper bracket, and they'll wrestle twice. So 5 duels in 2 days. It's going to be streamed live on Flow. They got brand new wrestling match from Resolite. Cliff Keen is the title sponsor. They have a longstanding relationship with the Hall of Fame. They're doing a dinner the last night with Dan Gable and John Smith Roundtable. So you should see a lot of stuff about this. If you're in Stillwater, you can attend that dinner. They have tickets for sale for that. If you're in Stillwater, you can go to the meet. Obviously, they have group tickets on sale for high school teams. We want to get as many high school kids as we can there. And shout out to Leroy Smith, Ed Gallegos, Jack Carnifex, Clay Hudson, Lindsey Hammer, Ethan Kyle, probably a lot more people, but those are the people I'm on the conference call every week on. So it's an exciting event. The list of teams are there, everything else. I mean, they've worked with Visit Stillwater, the coaches' socials at Eskimo Joe's. I mean, they're trying to do everything first class and right. So it should be a really fun event. And Mark, I'm sure you'll be tuning in and letting us know if I screwed it up or not.
I'll let you know.
So, all right. So, bunch of news in college wrestling. Let's start with the bad news. Robbie Howard is out for the year with an injury. Ja'Cory Teamer is out for the year with an injury. Ridge Lovett is taking a redshirt year. Poznansky is taking a redshirt year. Let's go through these sort of quickly individually. Robbie Howard was projected to score about 1.5 points, so that really doesn't affect Penn State. I'm sure they thought he would do better, but if he wrestled up to his ranking, not a big deal. Ridge Lovett coming out is gigantic for Nebraska. The team rankings, which we'll get into, 2 of the 3 sources accounted for that, 1 didn't, so they're going to drop even further because he was their highest ranked guy. If he came out of redshirt at 41, like today, he'd be ranked number 1 in the country. Teamer's a huge blow for Arizona State. That moves them from a locked in third on their own tier to kind of in a tier of like 3rd through 7th with a bunch of people. And Poznansky for Rutgers, they weren't in the top 20, but pretty much keeps them out of that unless a bunch of people wrestle above their rankings. So, Mark, I'll start with you. Thoughts on those 4 guys?
Yeah, I mean, you hate to see people lose, a year of eligibility, especially when their teams are counting on them. Lovett, I had heard earlier this year that he could be redshirting, and then I think it's been kind of finalized that he is. I don't think he would have went 41, David. I think he would have stayed up at 49.
Right.
And then, Teamer, you just hate to see him not compete this year, because this was Arizona State's year to maybe, place second in the country and maybe push Penn State. If anybody's going to push them, it's going to be Arizona State, maybe Iowa, now maybe Iowa State. So, I mean, very few schools can push Penn State, and without him, it's going to be really hard for Arizona to be one of those schools to do it.
Yeah, we looked at their roster. They only have 2 seniors on the team. They're 2 really good seniors, and Courtney and McGee. They got Richie Figueroa waiting in the wings at 25. They've obviously recruited well. So conceptually, if you take the Teamer points out and add them back in next year, theoretically he would kind of be the Courtney points, and then a Figueroa or somebody at 33 can be an All-American. They really like Montalvo. They really like Negron. I got a chance to visit with that coaching staff when I was out there in October. So, GT, let's talk about just to kind of ping pong this around. Let's talk about the Iowa State-Wisconsin duel. So just so people know, if they did, this is I'm going to just sort of cherry pick what Andrew Spey wrote on Flow, but the duel was gigantically in Iowa State's favor. The final score of the duel was 26-6, and they basically won 8 out of 10 matches. Ton of upsets for them. Swiderski over Zargo, biggest one of the day, Pinheiro over Johnson, Schuyler over Hilger, and not many of the matches were fluky. David Carr had a stalling call against it, but won, I think, 3 takedowns to none against Hamidi. I mean, you're an Iowa State alum, GT. That's where I started. So, I mean, we have a little bias towards that. They look really good early in the year. I listened to Flow yesterday, and they said they figured out that Pinheiro Johnson had like sickle cell or something like that because he was always getting tired. So they've actually, and we've all coached guys that work their fannies off, and then they get tired, and you don't know if it's like stress management. You don't know if it's a health issue. It's frustrating for everyone, but how good can Iowa State be this year?
I think it's first and foremost that it was a great duel to watch. I mean, there's a lot of close matches, and Iowa State edged out Wisconsin in a few tight matches, and then of course had some very big statement wins in that duel. I mean, I've also been a part of duels where you lose a lot of close matches, and all of a sudden you lose, 3 toss-ups, and all of a sudden now it's 8-2, and that's the final, and it's like, oh well. Wisconsin's way better than that score is indicative, and they're going to be a very big problem in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily know if they have the horses to necessarily win the Big Ten title, but they're going to put a lot of guys in the national tournament, and they're going to have a lot of guys on the stand, I believe. But for the Iowa State group, this is a great coming out party for a lot of the freshmen. A lot of the guys that have kind of already been there, and for Tarakina to have a big win, David Carr knocking off a legitimate threat in Hamidi, and then all of the other guys, Johnson upsetting Gomez, Swiderski looking like a beast, and that picture is really cool to see with the Wisconsin guy with his blood all. Yeah, this sport. Hey, we just built different, right? So, I think it's a great validation for Dresser and his staff, knowing that they've put together this kind of good juggernaut team and seeing these guys progress. My hat's off to those guys and coming out of the gate swinging right out at the beginning of the year. So really looking forward to seeing how that team progresses throughout the entire year, because I do think that they have some guys that could make some noise on the national scene. But it's just really cool to see, an early season kickoff between 2 very good, regional rivalry teams, Wisconsin and Iowa State being outside of the Big Ten and Big 12. They put it on the line with each other. That doesn't happen all the time. So hats off to Wisconsin and, basically Iowa State for putting that together right away.
Yeah, for sure. So let's look at the team rankings and how that changed things. So this is on the columns on the right are where they are this year. We're using flow, Intermat, and wins team rankings. So in order, it's Penn State, Iowa, Mizzou, Ohio State, Arizona State. As you can see, they're kind of in that Mizzou to Cornell range, all between 50 and really 51 and 60. But then Arizona State, Michigan, Cornell, Minnesota, obviously, if Gable comes back, they pop up to third, and a bunch of those other teams lose points. Iowa State jumps to 9. We'll talk about that. Nebraska, I highlighted the 44.5 number because Wynn did not account for Lovett being out, or else they would lose literally 16 points and be at 28.5. If you look on the left, what I'm going to do this year, guys, is keep track of these rankings week by week so we can see where they progress. So, for example, Arizona State last week was at 66 and a third. Now they're at 56 and a third. Iowa State jumps ballpark 8 points off their duel. Nebraska loses about 11 points, and Wisconsin drops about 8 points. Those are the big movers and shakers, and direct result of the teamer injury and the dual head-to-head and the Lovett situation. So I don't know if we'll get into picks this week on team stuff, but I definitely want to talk about the individual rankings. So you guys know this. Christian Thompson over at fantasygrade.com, he's put together something super cool here. Doesn't matter if you play fantasy wrestling or not. He put together a bunch of this ranking stuff. So I want to share this with you, make sure I got this right. What's going on here? Share tab. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so you can go to fantasygrade.com and just, you can set up a free account, but this thing is freaking awesome. So what they're doing, if you look at this across the top at 125, they have where they're ranked. They have where they were ranked last week. They have the weight class, the name, the school, the grade, the high, low, and average, and then were they ranked in all three sources. The three sources we're using are Intermat, Flow, and Win. So, for example, they look at a guy that's kind of got different sporadic rankings. Look at Brandon Kaler. Intermat's got him at 10. Flow's got him 11. Win's got him at 6. So if you work sort of right to left, he's in all three sources. His worst ranking's 11. His best ranking is 6. The math of that averages out to 9. And that number 9, even though it's at 9 points, makes him 8th in the rankings. Last week, he was 7th. He'll probably drop more a little bit once, maybe not, once maybe Wynn acknowledges that he lost a match to the Army wrestler. So just something to think about here, look at. But as we go through the individual rankings, what he's done is like, look at Terrakina. So he jumped from 20 to 11 based on that win. And if you look out to the right, and so, Mark, I want to talk to you about this one in particular. What would you have done with Terrakina? Barnett, like, for example, Flo moved Terrakina all the way up to 6, as you can see there. And then the rest of the guys just moved him up, but not over Barnett. Yeah. And I know the conversation is body of work, but that's a very ambiguous, sort of nebulous, sort of moving term, because body of work, how much do we count a year ago? And then I think we all agree a year ago matters less and less as you get further and further into the season. So there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just curious, where would you put Terrakina?
I'd put him ahead of Barnett just because I think that's where he should be. He faced him head-to-head and beat him. So because their rankings, David, and this isn't what they're going to see the national tournament on this weekend, put him where he belongs. He beat somebody that's really good. Put him up there. I don't think necessarily Barnett should be dropping behind guys that he beat last year at the national tournament. I just think Terrakino should be moved up because he's improved that much from last year. That's my opinion.
I don't disagree with you, and that's probably what we would have done. But it's interesting because Terrakina's obviously lost to some guys that in Flo's rankings he's above, but he lost to him last year.
Yep.
Flo is saying, look, it's a new year. That's how we're looking at it. And that's not wrong. I mean,
No.
there is no wrong or right. Let me do the disclaimer that I always say at the beginning of the year. Mark and I did rankings for 6 years. It is the most thankless job in the world. We were the first guys to go to 25. We were the first guys to go to 33. Mark almost got divorced based on how much time I bugged him on Sunday nights putting these together. God bless Dana. Shout out to Dana Ostrander for putting up with me for that many years. But it's difficult. And it's all these sort of split decisions. Like, what do you do? Like, because there's more than one defendable position.
And I agree. But, to me, if Flo's going to do rankings, be consistent on how you're going to do them. Don't move one guy way up that is a freshman that's never competed in college because he beat a good kid by, 2 points, and move him up into the top 5 in the country. And
what weight are we talking about, Marco? So we can
talking 133, David. And I have no problems with them moving him up there.
Talking about Mendez.
Yes.
So, folks, if you're just listening, Jesse Mendez from Ohio State beat Lucas Bird, okay? The Intermat left Bird at 6 and Mendez at 11. Wynn put Bird at 7 and Mendez at 11. And Flo put Mendez at 5 and Bird at 6. So, GT, I'll let you – you're a coach. So there's an argument they were consistent in that they did the same thing with Terrakina that they did with Mendez. They bumped the guy that beat the guy right above him. And then there's Mark's argument. You wrestled one tournament in college. Where do you start? And I will just add, like, the first week we were supposed to rank Gable Stevenson was probably the biggest nightmare of ranking a freshman in my life, because wherever we did it, there was going to be a ton of pushback.
Yeah, so I think, as far as the rankings are concerned, and like kind of what Mark has alluded to is that, basic body of work and like, hey, winning one match or whatever it is. Like, I think it's a difficult conversation to have because, yeah, let's say, for instance, Jesse Mendez did beat Lucas Bird. It's a great match. It's a great win over a, returning All-American. You're a freshman guy, great win. But does that constitute enough to then put, somebody that is a freshman that only has one win all the way into the top 5? Because you're basically using Lucas Bird as the benchmark for him as a returning All-American, and that's why he's that high. Or, do you, because it's so early in the season, does Lucas Bird fall that far because then he lost to basically an unranked guy, and then you wind up in a situation where you're looking at it where it's more, I would say probably in that, I don't know, maybe you put him at 8 and 9. You don't give him the full.
Yeah, that's the argument, right? Like, if we're here, do I bump this guy above this guy? Do I bump this guy below this guy, or do I meet him in the middle? And like that in general. Big picture, that's how all these rankings conversations go. And the more data points you have to not completely nerd out, it's easier. And just like Grant, you do this with your team at Grandview. You're picking the 12 best guys. And the 12 guys you think right now, if you wrote down 12 names that you think are going to go to nationals or should go to nationals, you will be wrong by March. It's just because guys get better, guys get worse, guys get hurt. Any of those just normal things. So it's a trick, right? Or tricky, right?
Yeah, and once again, I think also back to the point of the match specific matches is that, like, let's say, for instance, and this is probably a non-factor. Like, I don't think Jesse Mendez is just going to sit out and be like, get extra matches in and keep his ranking at 5 and not wrestle anybody else for the rest of the year. But that happens sometimes where you go get one solid victory, you get one thing, and then you basically not necessarily run away from competition, but you don't take any extra risks, let's say in a duel or whatever, until the conference season comes around. And then you go to the conference and you basically go and do whatever. And I'm not suggesting that anybody does this as a practice, but sometimes this does occur either by injury or by choice or whatever it is. And they get that one win, go all the way up to like number 3 in the nation. And they're like, well, hey, listen, I got one win over the returning finalist. Like, my seed's set. I'm not going to wrestle anybody else for the rest of the year.
So this didn't happen exactly that way, but a perfect example of that is Joe Colon. You guys might know the year better than me. Pinned Tony Ramos at the finals of Midlands one year. And that's when Northern Iowa was in the EWL. And I remember saying this to Mark. I go, Joe Colon is going to be like the number 2 seed at nationals because as long as I can't remember who was one, but they were handcuffed. It was a head-to-head matchup. One guy pinned the other guy. Colon was going to walk through that EWL schedule. And as long as Ramos won the Big Tens, head-to-head's like the biggest part of the seeding criteria. And Colon only had like one loss or was undefeated. Obviously, Joe was a really good wrestler. And he wrestled his full schedule. He didn't duck anybody. He didn't get injured. But your point is really well taken, GT, that's how it can go. The other thing that's super fascinating about it this year is we don't even know if Jesse Mendez is wrestling because he gets 5 dates before he even has to decide. And that's a brand new variable that we've never thought about until this year. Like Jesse Mendez could wrestle and then get injured and take a medical red shirt, but he doesn't have to get injured now to not be wrestled. Like if Bouzakis just starts smashing people at 33, like if Bouzakis, and this is, if Bouzakis pinned RBY, like, well, maybe he's better, and then Mendez actually comes out of the rankings. So the one thing too, if you guys see, if you're looking at this, the only problem with this algorithm is that right now it doesn't take into account 2 guys ranked from the same school. So if you look, for example, at number 19 is Brody Teske, and number 17 is Colin Schriever. So I'm working with Christian on combining those guys. On the spreadsheet, we used to just combine them and put the ranking in there. But in general, it's not going to affect too many people in the top 16. And the upside of this thing is so much more than that one minor thing. I'm going to just walk through the weight classes real quick and just kind of point out the big moves. 25, Terakina moved up, and Medley had a bad weekend. He moved down. A couple new guys popped in. 33, we talked about Mendez, Zach Redding. So how do you pronounce the guy's name? Atasayev? GT, is that who was the guy ranked from Nebraska or Iowa State at 33, the Russian?
Oh, Ramazan. I didn't really basically call him by his last name. I just called him by his first name. So
okay, first name Mark. There you go.
Yeah,
okay,
so that was based off of my ability to speak Russian. So that was not like.
Yeah. Well, he was ranked. He came out of the rankings, and Redding jumps in. Kairini took a loss, and Latona took a loss too. So those are the movements there. Let's go to 41. Not a lot here. Zargo lost. So Swiderski came in at 15, 11, and 11. Mark, good, bad, right, wrong. What do you think?
Pretty good right now. I'd say he's right where he belongs at this time. I don't have a problem at all with him. I have a major problem with the next weight, but that'll get there. I think Casey's going to be really good. I picked him to be an All-American this year. I think I was one of the only people in the 3 of us to pick him to be an All-American. I know his club coach. I watched him wrestle against Mendez twice last year, and he beat Mendez both times he wrestled him. And the last time, it wasn't close. So I know how talented he is, and I think it's a weight where after the first 3 or 4 guys, David, I think he fits right in with that group of guys. So.
First name Casey. Let's get it, Mark. All right, 149, Marco. Let's find the problem. So, for example, before we get to what you're upset about, Ridge Lovett is listed at 2 because Wynn still has him in. He will pop out this week.
Yep.
If you're just looking at individual stuff, you're like, okay, got it. But where it affects team scores is like Ohio State picks up points, App picks up points, Wisconsin, Arizona State, Mahler, and Murin, and Yaya, because Yaya moves from 9 to 8, and that's a 3.5 point jump. And the same thing if you move from 13 to 12, that's like a 0.5 point jump. But tell me, and so the other problem here is Oklahoma's got 2 guys ranked. They got Mitch Moore and Willie McDougall, I think, or at least that was in the wrestle-offs. All right, Mark, I assume you got a problem with Panero Johnson?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
because
all right.
On the other weights, and this is just with Flo. I haven't looked at all the other rankings. This is just with Flo. They moved everybody ahead that won this weekend of the guy they beat, except for him. And you know what? He had the best win of anybody this weekend because it wasn't close. He dominated that match. He outperformed him. It was an unbelievable match by that young man. And he deserves
am I right
to be.
that Gomez didn't score an offensive point? Like, he didn't get a takedown, right?
No.
Okay.
He got into a position where he could have maybe put him to his back, but he fought it off and never gave anything up. And I think he scored 3 or 4 takedowns to win that match and didn't give up a takedown. He legitimately beat him up pretty good. And if anybody deserves to jump of all these guys that they've moved up, he, to me, deserves more than anybody else on the board. Grant, would you agree with that comment?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. I will tell you this. Nate Carr Sr. and Villaesca told me this summer that Panero Johnson was going to be really freaking good. And there's that whole storyline, too, where Gomez retired from wrestling and left Iowa State. So, that's an interesting storyline there, too. So that's sort of the main movements at 49, 57, really nothing in the top 12 to speak of in terms of movement. 65, really not a lot of movement. So the one thing at 57 is, and I think we'll talk about it later, but I think a couple of us had picked Teamer to make the finals. And so, I think we should get a mulligan on that this early. But if that bumps up, look at North Carolina State. If Ed Scott jumped from 9 to 8, then that bumps them 3.5 points. It also just gets everybody one step closer to the podium. So 65. So GT, I know you watched this. I don't think we thought David Carr would have a problem at 65, but I thought he looked good at 65, up a weight, moved his feet real well, kind of relaxed a couple times on the edge and got a couple stall calls on the edge. But other than that, I thought he looked good. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think, once again, that's a very, very good high-level matchup between those two athletes. I think that's a really, really good, a early season look. So, yeah, I think it was a great match for Carr. Great win for him.
The other thing, which I'll just say this is why you shouldn't have wrestle-offs and make them public, because Carson Carcel lost his wrestle-off and nobody thinks he's not going to wrestle, and he's ranked 6th in the country. So there's that.
Hang on, Dave. I'm going to disagree with Grant on this. I don't think Carr wrestled that good of a match. 2 of his takedowns, he dove in at the legs and basically went to his stomach and was able to work his way up and finish him, which is not a position he wants to get into, especially against some of these guys that are ahead of him. He had one really nice takedown where he countered a shot from Hamidi and was able to score on it. And that was, to me, that was his best performance of that match. I think he has a ways to go to get into those top 2 echelons right now. I think he'll get there. But to say that, I don't think it was his best match. I don't even think it was close. I think on his feet, he was a little bit timid, and maybe he had a right to be with as good as Hamidi is on the mat and countering and putting people to their backs. But when you land on your stomach, it reminds me of, a couple guys that I used to coach. How do you get to your stomach? What are you doing there? But he's good enough he was able to score off that, but wasn't his best shots. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think clearly he'll tighten it up. If you want to make the optimistic argument for David Carr, you go, hey, it's the first match of the year. He's up a weight. He didn't wrestle well, and he won the match 3 takedowns to none. So, that's probably the optimistic argument. The negative argument is, or pessimistic is, he got stretched out. He wasn't fundamentally sound at all times, and that's probably going to hurt him, especially against a cradle guy like O'Toole. So if we split the middle, it's a good win against a top 5 guy, and they'll probably sink a lot of time in helping him tighten those things up.
And I really expect him to be in the finals of the national tournament. I mean, I picked him to be in the finals. I just think, I don't know if it's a weight going up to 65. He's a little bit cautious about what's going on there. I think he's got to get kind of into the flow of things with the little bit bigger guys.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of matches. Like I did a play-by-play at Ottawa and Baker, and there was like a 25-pounder that wrestled 33 last year, and he just hit the wall about the 4-minute mark. But, first, we all wrestled. Like, first weigh into the year is usually not ideal. You got to get your body regulated. Some people had to pass the hydration test. You have to be, like, super your weight, like get 2 under and drink 2 pounds of water. There's a bunch of stuff like that. So, it's smart to not overreact to some of the results.
Agreed.
74, really no changes in the top echelon. 84, pretty par for the course. Whitlake beat Haas in a close wrestle off, so that's worth keeping an eye on. 97, Hoffman drops a little bit. Zach Bronigal goes up. I'll see Zach Bronigal this weekend, which we'll talk about. Heavyweight, pretty chalky. So, but the other thing I wanted to show people on this website is, for example, if you want to look at just quickly who are all the number 1 ranked guys or all the number 5 ranked guys, you just click on this number 5 and it literally gives you all 10 number 5 guys. Then if you want to look and say how good is a specific team, so you go, hey, here's Iowa State. So right now, like if you go, okay, they've got 3 guys in the medals if they go to their seeds, and Kark and Bastida. They've got 1, 2, 3 more guys in the blood round, in Terrakina, Redding, and Schuyler, and Panero Johnson, 4 guys, and Casey Swiderski is 1 more round out than that. And if you look at, like, if we go to Ohio State as an example, because Mark, I'll say this on the record, Mark and I had a private conversation, and he was way more correct about how good Ohio State is this year. So so look at this team. They've got in the top 8, D'Amelio, Sasso, Karchla, Smith, Romero, Orendorff. That's 6 guys, excuse me. Hoffman is in the round of 12 right now, and he placed last year. Mendez is 9th, and he just beat an All-American. Heinzelman's in the round of 12, and I'll tell you this right now, I'll take any bet in the country that somebody thinks that Patty Gallagher is going to finish 24th. I mean, I'll bet anybody he's going to do better than that. But what's really cool about this site is, like, you can pull this thing up. So, for example, if you look at Ohio State, and then if we click over and go to, like, Virginia Tech, because they're dueling, and then you can see, like, okay, where are the big matchups? All right, so Virginia Tech got Andonian in the top 8, Mackay in the top 8, Hunter Boland in the top 8, and they're going to be underdogs in pretty much every other match. And so, like, hey, that duel could get out of hand, but also, like, they got really good kids. Like, Latona is getting used to 33. Tom Crook had a great first week. Caleb Henson's a freshman with super high upside. Hunter Katka's a legit dude. So there's a bunch of ways where this stuff this is just if you're a nerd like I am, this site is unbelievable. Like I said, it's nothing to do with whether or not, like you're picking, teams for the national tournament for your fantasy wrestling pool. This is just a way to look at it real quick. I was talking to my buddy Jason Keck last night, and I'm like, we're doing the play-by-play on one of the mats this weekend at the Mizzou Invite. And so, like I told him, I'm like, we can have 6 windows open and have all 6 teams. They're Mizzou, Illinois, Cal Poly, Drexel, Maryland, Little Rock. And then you can look at it and go, well, here's the composite rankings. Here's where Flow has them ranked because it's streamed live on Flow. And you can very easily go, these are the biggest matchups. Like, Flow also put an article out today about the Mizzou Invite, which we'll clearly work off of and say, here's where guys will be ranked. But, like, for example, Rocky Elam and Bernie Truax are both in the top 6 or 7 at 197. That's kind of your marquee matchup. It's like if you could change the order of the matchups, that might be your last match of the day. So, Mark, you and I like to nerd out on this stuff. What do you think about how all that data is getting?
Yeah, I think it's probably the coolest thing that I've seen in a long time, because it's so hard to find a site where you can get to that information. You got to go back and forth. And what Christian was able to do is phenomenal. It's going to help so many people stay current on what's going on and get excited about duels that are coming up. People are going to look at this, David, and they're going to look at Penn State, or they're going to look at Oklahoma State, and they're going to look at Iowa. And I know that's not till February. They're going to start figuring out where the matches are going to be won and how close it's going to be. And I think they're going to do that with Iowa State and Iowa coming up in a month.
That's the one. Like, so GT, like, I know you guys actually wrestle Iowa State, but like, if you look at a couple weeks from now, the Iowa State duel, there, especially if Spencer Lee doesn't wrestle, there's a ton of sort of toss-up matches in there. You know, like Jacob Warner's ranked above Bastida, but Bastida beat him last year head-to-head. You know, so there's a bunch of matches. And the thing about dual meets are it's +3, -3. You know, like if you beat me, that's 3 you get, but it's 3 I don't get. So it's a 6-point swing. And so I just think, you know, we're not all like Grandview where we're just whipping everybody's tail. So some of these duels are a little bit closer. So I think this kind of database is pretty interesting to play with, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I think it's great. Absolutely. I think it's going to be a great tool.
Yeah. So a couple of things. National Signing Day was yesterday. I'm not going to talk about everybody who signed. Don't want to slight anybody. Congratulations to anybody who signed. Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, JUCO, club, whatever, on wrestling in college. You are in the small percentile of kids, of athletes, period, that compete in college, and in wrestling specifically. I think probably the biggest single one was Christian Carroll flipping from Illinois to Penn to Oklahoma State. We can talk about that later, but I mean, I know that was a huge one. And then I think probably the last thing if you guys want to talk about this, is Ohio State wrestles Virginia Tech this weekend. That's probably, I'm looking at the schedule, which Seton Hall Pirate always sends to us. So kind of the big duels. Campbell is at Michigan Friday, and I don't think that's a great duel, but it's at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is super cool. They're working with the military, and you guys know how I feel about that. There's a little tournament in Iowa called the Grandview Open on Saturday. Northern Iowa is going to be there, GT. Who else is scheduled to come in?
Oh, it's going to be large. I think already, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to quote it, but it's like north of 600 entries already between the Open and the freshman division. And they're hosting it at a brand new facility. It's at the Ignite facility in Johnston. So it's going to be a very, very large tournament.
Awesome. So I will be at the Mizzou Invite. We talked about that. Poly, Drexel, Illinois, Little Rock, Maryland, Missouri in alphabetical order. Oklahoma State's at Lehigh this weekend. Nebraska is hosting North Carolina State. So this is the time. And then Michigan's at North Carolina on Sunday. So this is the time, folks, to make sure your Flow subscription is updated, to make sure your ESPN3 subscription is updated. Big Ten Network doesn't start till December. The Iowa State duel is the first one. And then, Flow and Track both do a great job of literally looking at the box scores. And just so people know, Mark knows this is what we used to study every weekend. Is like, look at that list, go through, and you have to find all the upsets. Because if Grant's ranked 1 and I'm ranked 3 and he beats me, like, okay, like maybe we'll talk about it, but it doesn't change the rankings. So tons of things to watch this weekend. I will say this. I see people go, hey, it's wrestling season. If you're like us, it's always wrestling season. It's just whether we're grabbing legs or not grabbing legs, and whether we're wearing school uniforms or Nike Freestyle or Greco-Roman singlets. So, but I do know that a lot of people are very loyal to their schools, whether it's grade school, middle school, high school, college. And you're right, folks, in that sense that like this is the time where people kind of rally around those teams and get excited. And, there is nothing like the college prep, like a Ja'Cory Teamer injury. If they didn't keep team score, wouldn't mean nearly as much on what we're talking about at Arizona State if it was only an individual tournament. The Ridge Lovett redshirting is a gigantic thing. Like it pretty much cost them the duel against North Dakota State. By the way, we need to shout out North Dakota State, Kish, Marsden, Obi, those guys that's a huge win for their program, winning that duel. So next week, I think we'll start talking about the NWCA preview. Week after that, we'll probably go early because obviously Thanksgiving's on a Thursday. So, GT, good luck this weekend at Grandview with not only wrestling, your kids wrestling that tournament, running that tournament. Marco, what are you going to keep your eye on this weekend?
I'm going to go over and watch Grandview.
Nice.
If I'm home, so.
And I will report
I'll pay to get in. Grant's not getting me in. I don't know what's going on, but we'll talk about it.
Help support your local establishments, Mark. Come on.
Mark will pay, but Mark is also on the Godfather pass in almost every event in America. So, and the Panda will be out bumbling around in Kansas City at the Mizzou invite. So I'll be on the mic there for one of those with Jason Keck. Should be some good wrestling. If you're
Ohio State, Virginia Tech's going to be a good duel. I know there's not a ton of great matches, but there's some really good matches. It's going to be worth watching.
57 will be interesting, right? Andonian and Gallagher. And then, this, like if the picks we made for Wisconsin, Iowa State tell you anything, is it's never chalk. Like there'll probably be an upset or two on each side.
I think Bolin Romero is going to be a great match.
Yeah, Hunter Bolin's ranked a lot lower than I think a lot of us think he should be. He's earned the spot he's at right now, but we've seen him have a much higher ceiling.
Yeah.
So. Okay, last thing I'll say is this. I was talking to Gary Abbott about some other things with USA Wrestling, and I just want to say this on the air. Gary probably doesn't even remember saying this. He goes, I'm a big fan of the podcast with you guys. That is high praise from the GOAT. So we will continue to try to earn that praise, but some weeks you don't know like who's watching and listening, and for Gary to say that, I know is encouraging to all of us. So thanks, G. We appreciate you. All right, for Mark and Grant, I'm David. We'll speak to y'all next week.